Hi everyone, I'm Katrina and today I have a spoiler-free review of Gemina by Amie Kaufman Jay Kristoff. This is the second book in the Illuminae files, the sequel to Illuminae, and whilst this will be a spoiler-free review of Gemina, there may be some spoilers for the first book, so I wouldn't recommend watching this video if you haven't read Illuminae. I do have a spoiler-free review of Illuminae, which I'll have linked in the cards and in the description, so I'd recommend watching that instead. And without further ado, let's talk about Gemina. Gemina begins after the events of Illuminae, but we do actually follow different main characters in this one. The main characters that we meet in Illuminae are still present, they are still very much tied up in this story, but we just don't see quite as much of them in this one, especially towards the beginning. Elsewhere, Katie and Ezra are on the run, but in this book we follow Hannah and Nick, who live on the space station Heimdall, when a Baytech assault team invades the station and things just go tits up. This is just as twisty and turny, just as action-packed, and no less of a roller coaster ride for your emotions as the first book was. I read Gemina 3 times, twice in the physical format and once in audiobook. I actually read an advanced copy of Gemina which didn't have all of the illustrations present, so I did end up reading it a second time so that I could get kind of the whole experience with all of those visual elements. And in terms of the format, I get asked this question a lot. It's really hard to recommend one format over the other because I do think you get something different out of it whether you read the physical book or listen to the audiobook. And in the case of Gemina, we have some diary entries, which was an added format in this one. The amazing Marie Lu did the illustrations from those entries and they are incredible, absolutely astounding. So I find it really hard giving a solid answer here. If you have the means to do so, I would definitely recommend reading the physical book and also listening to the audiobook, whether this is at the same time or at separate times. If you have the means to do so, I would absolutely recommend it. It is such an incredible experience listening to the audiobook. They have a cast of characters, they have sound effects, and in Gemina they actually played the Lollipop song, so that was really cool to actually listen to it rather than just seeing the lyrics in the book. Gemina was definitely a 5-star read for me. I think the fact that I read the book 3 times within a 6-month period really does attest to that fact. But it is so hard to top the epicness that is Illuminae, so I think I enjoyed Gemina almost as much as I enjoyed the first book. I think that some of the story structures, the patterns in plot, and even character types from Illuminae are mirrored in Gemina, but for me this is a method that definitely works, so I really did enjoy that fact. The directions that this story takes just blew me away time and time again, so in the moment I actually didn't really notice that there were these similarities. There was enough there to make me enjoy it as it was on its own rather than kind of following a pattern from the first book. The last couple of 100 pages of Gemina absolutely made the book for me. There's some mind-boggling science stuff that we're introduced to, which I think I managed to wrap my head around, at least enough that I wasn't left feeling confused. I was never good at science, but I do think Gemina does a good job of explaining it in a way that even if you don't completely understand everything of it, you kind of get the gist and you're able to grasp it to an extent, at least in my experience anyway. I thought the science elements were so awesome, and I just really loved how the ending of Gemina really tied the story back to Illuminae, because not gonna lie, I really missed the characters from Illuminae. I absolutely fell in love with them, particularly Aiden, so it was sad not seeing them to the same extent in this book. I really did miss them. With that being said though, it definitely makes sense with the plot things that are happening in the story, and it also gives us the time to really get to know our new characters as well, and I ended up really enjoying them. We have Hannah, who is the daughter of the space station's commander, and our first impressions is that she's this kind of spoiled rich girl, but she definitely doesn't play into that stereotype. There are definitely some parts of her personality that tie up into that upbringing and her environment, but at the same time she is really skilled, she's really resourceful, she's able to kick some serious butt, she's had a bunch of combat training, and she has a really tactical thinking mind as well, which I really loved, and honestly for me she was the star of this book. I really enjoyed Hannah. The other main character that we meet in this one is Nick, and I have slight conflicted feelings about him. This is mainly because, especially towards the beginning of the book, he is extremely flirtatious with Hannah. She has a boyfriend, and he doesn't really stop hitting on her even if she tells him to stop, so that behavior was inappropriate. But over the course of the book, I ended up really liking Nick. Nick is part of a crime family, so he's a little bit of a bad boy, and I really enjoyed getting to see his life on the station and getting a bit of an insight into the underworld of the station, so to speak. But he does have a heart of gold, and I loved his relationship with his cousin Ella, who I'll talk about in just a moment. So they had some really great banter. He also did have some really good banter with Hannah. I thought Nick was just a really humorous character, and I kind of found at some points that, you know, with everything that's going on, life and death, all that fun stuff, at some points his humor could also be a bit of a coping mechanism for him. So obviously, you know, he's stressed out, but he's still trying to make light of some of the situations. So I really enjoyed that, and also just having Ella tease him as well for many things, one of which is his feelings for Hannah. I found that to be really amusing. Ella. She is, as I mentioned, Nick's cousin. She is also disabled. She doesn't have use of her legs, but despite any physical restraints she may have, that does not stop her whatsoever. She is a badass character. She has some epic hacking skills, which did feel kind of reminiscent of Katie from Illuminae, but she didn't feel like a duplicate or a replacement. They do share this same skill, but Ella just has such a strong personality. She is so incredibly snarky. Again, with all of the humorous banter, I really, really loved that. Whilst we're talking about characters, I'm just going to take this time to wallow in my own self-pity for a little bit. If you've heard me talking about Illuminae, you'll know that my favorite character is the artificial intelligence, Aiden. And like I mentioned earlier, we don't spend as much time with the characters from Illuminae. This also meant we didn't have as much time with Aiden, which made me really, really sad. I mean, I love Katie and Ezra, don't get me wrong, but Aiden is my favorite. And I think that part of the reason why I didn't enjoy Gemina more than Illuminae is because of how little we see of Aiden in comparison, and like kind of the way in which we see Aiden as well is quite different. So that made me sad. But that concludes my review of Gemina by Amie Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I will be doing a spoiler-free review of Obsidio, the third and final book in the Illuminae files. You can look forward to that review in the coming weeks. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you soon in a new video, but until then, I will talk to you in the comments. Bye!